Hey, it's John Wells again here at RSA Singapore, and I just sat in a really interesting presentation about vendor security lines. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Dr. Ken Baylor. I'm president and one of the founders of the Vendor Security Alliance.
Yeah, and so this, give me the elevator pitch on the vendor security alliance.
So the big problem we have is every company you do business with, you think you're doing business with just that company. Of course you're not. You have this vast ecosystem web of potentially hundreds or thousands of companies to do business with. And many of them, that's where your data actually goes. So one of the good things under GDPR, and in the future you're going to have at least a list of those companies. But in most situations you don't know, well, okay, the company I'm doing business with, have they done due diligence on these vendors? Have they selected the best vendors that are taking the best care of my data so that I know when I trust their brand that they're actually passing that risk on down the line?
It's kind of funny, you did a really good job, and you were an excellent presenter, as I told you earlier, but you kind of like start off and say, really, vendor security line, and then like, it's a big deal, right? Like you said, there was like 63% of all breaches of vendors, and like you start thinking about, you watch your presentation, and I get the sense of, oh my goodness, right? Look at all of our vulnerabilities that we just kind of blindly like hit through the RFP process. And
it is. I mean, vendor security is one of those areas that people think of it as part of purchasing a product, and it is. But people put all their effort into the proof of concept. The proof of concept is testing the product, see whether it's a good product. But you don't realize, okay, what other data is this company providing or selecting? How do they update the product? How do they build a product? How do they secure the product? And what you don't want is, well, this product looked really good. We didn't do any pen testing on it ourselves, and then lo and behold, it suddenly opens up all these massive backdoors, and everything gets either pulled out of your own network or pulled out of their network. And it might even be situations you didn't even know they handled all this data.
yeah, and I think the other thing I really like too, because right after you get that, I'm like, okay, here's another bunch of guys doing an alliance, and then as he drove through it, like he talked about like how economical this was, and how they weren't trying to boil the ocean, and then I hadn't had a chance to go to the website yet, but like you have like really good information on how people can like understand what they should be answered, or common questionnaires that people use that really are thorough walkthroughs of how you probably should interpret a vendor, and finally long-winded, like $1,500 for an audit, right? Like everything about that like smells really good, right?
Yeah, I think one of the issues we look at so a lot of companies do vendor due diligence completely differently, and that's really the problem. Everybody asks different questions. Sometimes there's no coherence with them. Some people just want to look at policies, but that's not good enough. If you say, okay, policies and procedures are great, that shows whether you know what you're talking about, and you've got a pen test to back that up, but you also look at things like, how do you build software, how do you test software, how do you deploy software, how do you let us know? And when you're looking at some of the new requirements under the new laws like the GDPR and the Philippines Data Protection Act, and even the new ones coming into Singapore, question is, okay, when you have a breach, you have to tell us that we're able to give full details and full notification to the Data Protection Authority within 72 hours. And that's a game changer. And by the way, that was also just brought into Japan last month.
And you were talking about GDPR, right? Is that like, even if you're not in Europe, like you're going to be most likely infected with it because you're talking about Privacy Shield, and it's just, the bottom line is the global economy, like this thing is going to be...
So there's this strange concept called extraterritoriality. And so generally laws apply within borders, as they should. But this crazy place called California, a few years ago, came up with this idea of, well, it doesn't really matter where you are, but if you have the data of a California person, then you must comply with the California Data Protection Law. Then Massachusetts came out with their law and said, if you're a citizens of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts anywhere, then you must stick with our law. So then Europe came up with this idea under GDPR, not under the current system, but under the new system, that if you're collecting the data of a European resident, no matter where in the world it is, you're under GDPR. Now, can they enforce it? Yes. If you have any assets over there, they can seize them.
Yeah, I think that, I think about, this kind of, there's this always in our industry, you have a lot of vendors, and there's like this kind of security theater, and then, we've learned over the last few years that, most of the industry protects the perimeter, and then we realize, well, a lot of our breaches are inner perimeter, and we get to that, and it's like we're uncovering blind spots, and like what I loved about your session was, like, should be so obvious, but like your vendor is an incredible blind spot if you're just not paying attention to this.
Absolutely.
And just finally, how do people find out about this?
Yeah, so it's vendorsecurityalliance.org. So go there, you can download the questionnaire and get in contact with us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi.